Believing that a modern church building is the house of God, or the Father's house, is contrary to what is in the Bible and has no basis in Scripture. Now, before you get your thumbs flying in a fury, listen, this isn't a hit piece on churches. But we all know that the word that's been translated as church is Ekklesia, or Ekklesia, which nowadays is debatably translated as an assembly, and some define it as called out ones. And it's where we get the word ecclesiastical, pertaining to church, and ecclesiology, the study of doctrine concerning the church. And this Ekklesia pops up in the Bible a massive 114 to 115 times, depending on translation. And not one single time does it refer to a building. The first verifiable mention we have of Ekklesia as a physical meeting place is from Clement of Alexandria in 198 AD, but that had more to do with meeting in private homes or beneath the streets and the catacombs to venerate the bones of the martyrs who had given their lives for the faith. Researchers generally believe that the Aqaba Church and the Megiddo churches to be the world's oldest known specific church structures, both built in the 3rd century. But it wasn't until the reign of Constantine that officially recognized church buildings began to appear. But those buildings more resembled Greco-Roman style basilicas and temples, and many of our church customs, traditions, and building ideas, Catholic, Orthodox, and Protestant, they still carry over remnants from that 1700 years later. And that's a video for another time. That video will probably make a lot of people mad, but hey, we'll cross that bridge and probably blow it up later. But overall, church buildings, as they were designed in the 4th century to the present day, symbolized a setting apart of sacred space, a place that you go to. And soon the church building began to take preeminence over those who attended those buildings, the actual church. Now hear me out. I love church buildings. I grew up in church buildings. I love exploring church buildings. I'm not saying don't go to your church buildings on Sunday or Saturday, whichever way you swing. But in putting a focus of our faith on a building, more than the people in them, creates a dividing line between the heart and the mind. It makes a building more symbolic of our faith than who we are, our identity, our actions, our very being as children of God. But let's go a little deeper here, because what a church building represents is a separation of the secular and the spiritual. Representatively, it's a sacred space that you go to worship and experience God. And when we say we go to church, it expresses a disjunction in our mind. I go to worship instead of living a life of worship. I go to church instead of I am the church. And this has sneakily crept into our modern language. How many pastors, I'm including myself in this, have said it's good to be in the Father's house, or welcome to the house of the Lord. But guess what? That's not scriptural. God doesn't live in buildings of stone, and we make an error and we actually disempower ourselves when we say that. Because 1 Corinthians 3:16 says that, do you not know that you are God's temple and that God's Spirit dwells in you? And don't forget 1 Peter 2:5 and Acts 7:48 through 50 straight up states that the Most High doesn't live in houses made by human hands. Buildings are just that, buildings. I love them, but God doesn't live in them. He lives in us. And when we say a building is the house of God, we're in essence saying that I have to go somewhere else to experience God. Whereas in truth, he's already living in me and in you. That's John 17:20-23. Can you encounter God in a building? Absolutely. In a church, you'll find believers, so you can and you will find God there. Can old church buildings have a power to them? Can there be thin places, as the Celtic saints like to call them? Yeah, for sure. I truly believe that. I've experienced that myself. But God doesn't live in buildings. God lives in people, and his glory is everywhere. So we got to remember that the religious spirit and the spirit of man seeks to keep God quantified in temples instead of believers stepping into the reality that we are God's temples, emissaries of God's eternal kingdom. The church is something we are. We should never forsake the assembly of the saints, but that assembly has nothing to do with designated church buildings. The glory of church buildings are a testament to human hands, not God's. And I do love church buildings, but I love the people inside those buildings even more. And when our building budgets are greater than our mission outreach budgets, when the number of people we can pack in seats and the amount of tithe collected are focused more on building improvements and expansion rather than the health of our fellow human beings, we've got a serious, serious problem, because Jesus is not coming back for buildings. And at the end of my days and your days, he's not going to ask us how many buildings we built and how many people we fit in them. He's going to ask us if we loved and we lived with everything that we had, and if we loved him and loved our neighbor as we loved ourselves. Personally, I could care less about building my ministry or building big church buildings. And I see a lot of folks worried about their ministries. But all we should care about is his ministry. And if a building is needed, then it's needed. It's good. It's blessed. It's awesome. It's a good thing. But the building and the institution is not and should never be the priority. He's the priority. And so are the people that he loves, which is everyone. We, you, me, us, all of us, we're the church. We're the assembly. So yes, enjoy gathering on Saturdays and Sundays and be a part of your community. Buildings are great, but they're not eternal. You are. God bless, and see you soon.